When I was young, getting through each day wasn't just hard, it was painful to my very soul. In school, I was laughed at and manipulated. The kids would make friendships with one another based on their common bond or with their laughter and enjoyment during teasing me. The teachers didn't understand me, didn't know how to help me, they just didn't know what to do with me. There was one instance, however, I will never forget. Once, a classmate walked in front of me and said, "Josh, one day I'll be a famous movie star and you'll be a homeless guy living in a box." Well, I have yet to see any of her films, or hear any of her TED Talks or anything. But I hope for her sake she's listening to mine. At the age of 13, after meeting after meeting, after doctor's appointment after doctor's appointment, I was diagnosed with autism. There was a time in my life when I thought that girl excluded me out of pure selfishness. However, I realize now that it wasn't selfish. In fact, it would have been in her own self-interest to include me. Little did she know how much I had to offer. Now, if there's one thing that Dave and I wish for you all to take away from this talk this evening, is that different perspectives are valuable and that we have more power to change the world together.
We believe that inclusion of neurodiverse people shouldn't be just because it's the law or even just because you think it's the right thing to do. That we all benefit from including people with different brains. Inclusion surely benefits all of us, but in order to get there, in order to fight this uphill battle, we need to acknowledge the historical context that we're up against and our country's ugly history of the opposite, of exclusion. So let's talk for a moment about Willowbrook. For those who don't know, Willowbrook was a massive residential facility right here in New York. It was where you put your kid when you didn't know what else to do. And quite frankly, you didn't have much of a choice back then. There was one caretaker for every 50 individuals. Only 20% of them would receive any sort of classes, but 100% would contract hepatitis. It didn't close until 1987. That means if Josh was born like 30 years earlier, he likely would have grown up somewhere where he may have eaten off of the floor. Shout out to Geraldo Rivera for bringing all that to light, but we still have a long way to go. Fast forward 20-something years, Josh was getting that late diagnosis, and I was in New York City becoming an educator. But I was seriously disappointed with the lack of meaningful opportunities that folks like Josh were being afforded. But in 2015, I found the coolest job ever at a nonprofit called the Nicholas Center. We provide support for people on the autism spectrum with employment opportunities. It was here where I was able to see countless young people affected by autism and other differences thriving in a truly inclusive environment. And it was also here that one day, a nervous kid walked into my office, told me his name was Josh Mirsky, and that he was looking for a job.
All these things the adults told me while I was growing up about how all the alienation, the struggle, and the isolation would end when I reached adulthood, I found that not to be true. You see, folks, there was a time before all this, before I had all this inner strength and confidence. See, during that time, I was a kitchen staff. And it was a toxic, tense, cruel environment, lots of yelling and verbal abuse, and it quite frankly slaughtered my self-confidence. You see, when I was in the kitchens, I even learned to question my own intellect, because after about the 15th time of being called stupid again and again and again, you start to believe it. That brings us to now. Obviously, lots changed, right? That stems from one thing and one thing only: my work environment at Spectrum Design Foundation. You see, gone are the days of being yelled at for not understanding things. Instead, replaced with days of being told things in a way which I understand, which is that I'm a visual learner. My perspective is valuable, and Dave simply seeing that in me and simply like treating me as if I'm not contagious or something has made all the difference. It's truly thanks to folks like Dave that I've come to realize that inclusion truly is the way of the future.
You know when you say, I need a different pair of eyes to look at this? Well, imagine having a different kind of brain that could look at this. Someone who could see things backwards upside down, inside out. Someone who's really good at looking at those tiny little details. Or someone who's a big picture dreamer type, like Josh. Or someone who remembers every single birthday, and I mean every single birthday in the office. Or someone who's a natural innovator. Because you see, sure, autism speaks, but it also listens. The way I see it, people with autism are designers by design. They say necessity is the mother of invention. And having seen dozens of individuals working, truly working, in a bustling, ever-changing, industrial setting over the course of the past 4 years, I can tell you that that's absolutely right. Not a week goes by where some sort of innovation isn't quietly made by someone on the autism spectrum. And what's more is that many of these tools and these strategies are then not only adopted, but celebrated by their neurotypical peers. Temple Grandin gave a talk called "The World Needs All Kinds of Minds." We'd like to build on that a bit and talk about what a world like that looks like to us. But to be clear, Josh and I aren't saying that autism is all rainbows and unicorns. As someone who's been supporting people with ASD for a long time, and for Josh, who's been living with it his entire life, we can both tell you it isn't. But so much of that is due to us just not thinking of them, not considering them, and not celebrating them. And that's why Josh and I are on this mission and have actually started our own podcast called Sounds Like Autism.
We imagine a world where people would say, I wish someone with autism would take a look at this math problem, help me out with my homework, accompany me on the piano, or simply apply to this job. Now time for some fun facts. The national unemployment rate in this country is 4.5%. America, we're doing pretty good. Would anyone like to take a guess at that same statistic, the unemployment rate, but for folks on the spectrum? 85% compared to that 4.5. But why is it when we have so much software? In general, we are brutally honest, fiercely loyal, detail-oriented, methodical, and so much more. Who in their right mind wouldn't want that in an employee? Now, are we all the same? Obviously not. Are we all good at everything? Again, obviously not. But we are all good at something. Not just anyone could get up here and speak from the heart like this, whether they be on the spectrum or not. But I have a confession to make. I'm really bad at math. However, I know someone who is on the spectrum who's really good at math. As a matter of fact, they are so good that if you were to put all Bernie Madoff's taxes, like all of them, in front of this guy, they'd have them figured out by lunch. That's impressive. Asking to be included isn't asking for a favor. Asking to be included is asking to give an able group of individuals the ability from going from being dependent on the state to being taxpayers.
And if you want to know what inclusion looks like, folks, this is it. The fact is, Josh and I, we need each other. For example, I have horrible fine motor skills. While I was interviewing Josh, I asked him about his career goals and his hobbies, and he told me that he'd never been successful in any of his jobs before, but he had huge dreams and aspirations, and he hoped to actually buy his own jet one day and be a pilot. And as we were talking, he told me that he spent a lot of time building model airplanes. So alarms went off in my head. And Josh and I walked to these massive embroidery machines at Spectrum Designs. And I pointed out all the screens and the buttons. And I told him, unfortunately, man, I can promise you that there are no airplanes at this facility, but this is the closest thing. I would never, ever be able to do that job. But Josh was incredible at it. He needed a little bit of help, but all it took was airplane analogies and doodles.
You see, when it comes to teaching folks on the spectrum job skills, it really doesn't take long for them to meet and then exceed your job expectations. And that's why we firmly believe that employers should just be a little bit more selfish.
1 in 1,000 Americans is a farmer. Interesting, right? 1 in 1,000 of us. And yet, I don't know if anyone here has seen this commercial that I've seen for farmersonly.com. Farmers only. It's cool. It's a dating website exclusively for farmers. For only $21.95 a month, those 1 in 1,000, those farmers, they can find love. And I think that's really nice. Isn't that nice? Where am I going with this? Well, 1 in 59 Americans has autism. And I don't remember ever seeing a commercial for a product or a for-profit service geared towards people on the autism spectrum. But that isn't to say that there aren't plenty of products that they use and that they benefit from.
You see, the way I see it, when you have autism, it's as if you and everyone else in the room have headphones on and are obviously listening to music. Now, the only difference between the headphones in your ears and the headphones in the next one's ears is that yours are all staticky. Now, society assumes they all listen to the same music with crystal clear clarity. So what do? Well, up to now, you just have to bob your head and you pretend to listen. But those days are over. Thanks to technology now out there, it's quite possible to remove that static. In my case, it was thanks to an application which presented information in a way which is similar to that of how sticky notes presents information. As a matter of fact, it's how this tool, how we got this whole TED Talk together.
But besides just to profit off them, we all benefit from including people and designing for people with different brains. Has anyone ever heard of the curb cut effect? Those cuts in the curb meant for wheelchairs, those didn't start appearing until the 1970s, and it actually took an entire civil rights movement, starting in Berkeley, California, to make those cuts in the curb law. Now, who benefits from curb cuts? Sure, wheelchairs. What about strollers, suitcases with wheels, delivery people? I can't even imagine a New York City working anymore without those cuts in the curb. And going back to that app that Josh and I use to stay organized for a moment, I've seen a ton of success in helping people with autism and other differences be more independent in life through using this app. And when their parent company caught wind of our unique use, they invited me to New York City to sit down with the app's founder for an interview to be broadcast to their 3,000 employees in cities across the globe. And it went really well. It was cool. Most of the questions were really straightforward about our specific use case. But the last question was, what can we in the tech world do for people with autism? And that was my moment to capitalize, right? And I could have said so many things. I could have said, help us start some sort of massive awareness campaign or donate to the 2 nonprofits that Josh and I work for. Or for each of those people in all of those cities around the globe to volunteer at a local charity or to sponsor our podcast. But the truth is, only 3 words came to my mind, and frustrated, I just blurted out, think of them.
What Dave was asking of them makes complete and total sense to me. And as a matter of fact, we're asking of everyone, from the individual to the group, society at large, to think of us. Consider us a viable resource. It costs you absolutely nothing, and you have so much to gain. So, going back to that girl I mentioned in the beginning, if you're listening, I would like to just say one thing to you. Thank you. Thank you for sending me on a lifelong journey to create a more inclusive world for us all. I just wish for your sake you would have gotten to know me. You should have just been a little bit more selfish. Thank you.